So recently, Jacobin, a socialist magazine, along with YouGov and the Center for Working Class Politics, released a study called Commonsense Solidarity: How a Working Class Coalition Can Be Built and Maintained. This study focused on working class voters in a select few swing states, not the least of which including Michigan and Wisconsin, which are some of the key Rust Belt swing states, especially over the last two election cycles. And they're specifically looking at whether or not progressive candidates, which up to this point, in terms of the high-profile races at least, have succeeded mostly in blue urban areas such as New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, etc. And this study tries to wonder how they can continue to expand and continue to win in more swing areas. And one of the key findings, as outlined in the summary by Jacobin, is the following. Working class voters prefer progressive candidates who focus primarily on bread and butter economic issues and who frame those issues in universal terms. This is especially true outside deep blue parts of the country. And this is something that I think makes perfect sense, because when you talk about the economic issues, that those affect everybody. When you're talking about woke issues, and I despise using that term because a lot of people completely misuse it and clearly don't know what it means, but I'm just using it for argument's sake here. But when you talk about woke, so basically going all in on like the social issues, like for instance, this quote from Representative Cori Bush of Missouri right here. Here, she calls Senator Joe Manchin's opposition to the Build Back Better Act, President Joe Biden's sweeping legislative agenda, and I put that in quotation marks because it is completely gutted at this point and completely unrecognizable and a shell of its former self. But moving on, she calls his opposition to that anti-black. Now, the reason this is problematic is because, well, maybe she's not wrong. Maybe it would disproportionately harm black people more than others. But by pointing that out, it only strengthens the argument of the anti-woke crowd that not just Republicans, but even a lot of independents who would otherwise be receptive to politics such as Cori Bush's. The reason that if you don't frame it in a universal term, then you're more likely to turn people off. And then there are a lot of people who are going to cry class reductionism. And for those of you that don't know what class reductionism is, I'll put the definition up on the screen right now. But no, this is not a case for class reductionism. In fact, this study goes on to elaborate on that point. Progressives do not need to surrender questions of social justice to win working class voters, but certain identity-focused rhetoric is a liability. So it's not like having a message of, well, this is kind of like talking about the social issues. This doesn't necessarily hurt a candidate, but emphasizing it as a centerpiece of your campaign could be detrimental. And it's important to focus on the economic issues first and foremost, especially once again in swing areas and not like deep blue in more recently suburban areas that would be more likely to vote for. Well, I suppose I should actually take this time to categorize some of the candidates that they gave, and they gave a little bit of a summary about it right here. The types of candidates that they give are the progressive populist, Bernie Sanders style candidate who has their message that pits the working class versus the wealthy elites and focuses on kitchen table, or as I call bread and butter economic issues. The woke progressive, somebody like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that emphasizes a lot on social justice and is much more identity focused. Or Cori Bush is another example, as I just mentioned, as well as the woke moderate, somebody like Kamala Harris, which calls for more incremental policy changes regarding economic issues, but also has somewhat of a similar activist rhetoric. The mainstream moderate, somebody like Joe Biden, that stresses the importance of bipartisanship and national unity, or the Republican, which is essentially somebody like Trump. And as the results of the study show, on key issues including a job guarantee, ending systemic racism, and Medicare for all, the progressive populists significantly outperformed every other option regarding among the respondents from the studies. So what the study shows is really something that has kind of been the answer all along, but a lot of people are just kind of afraid to go all in on it, I fear. And that is, when you focus on the bread and butter economic issues, you are much more likely to win. Now, there are plenty of other obstacles that stand in the way, and this could be big money that is funneling your opponents, as well as maybe just having the D label next to your name. Because there's another thing that the study points out, and this is something that I think a lot of leftists are going to take issue with, and I'm not exactly super easy about it either, but it is something that I think is worth discussing, and that's this part of the study right here. While there are plenty of leftists that want to disarm from the Democratic Party, the study says, quote, non-voters are less favorable to independents running as candidates than voters, and marginally prefer Democratic candidates to independent candidates. So what this shows is how these people would actually prefer to have an independent candidate, to have a Democratic candidate, excuse me. And, this does create a problem because, as we've seen a lot of the Democratic progressives in Congress, they have kind of not put up the fight, especially on economic issues. And I think that this could be a problem for a lot of leftists. And, for me personally, it is something that I am a little bit iffy about. Having said that, I don't discount the entirety of the study based on that one thing. However, there is one thing that is a little more concerning, I suppose you could say, and that's towards the end when they explain the methodology of the study. Right here, as you can see, the methodology, YouGov interviewed over 2,600 respondents who are residents of Nevada, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, or Wisconsin, who are over the age of 18, who are not Republican. Now this is a little bit of a red flag right here, because they're not counting Republican working class voters, when there are plenty of union Republicans out there, people who, on an economic message, it is not impossible for the progressive populist to get. However, one of the other ways that I look at this is that maybe saying something like, maybe these are just the Democrats, the still registered Democrat, but they now just vote Republican because the Democrats have completely abandoned them, and now they're with the Republicans because they're siding with them on the culture war or something. That is entirely possible. Not only that, but as that screen cap I just put up said, they're still focusing on people who have less than a 4-year college degree, and that's a demographic that Trump gained on, especially in 2016 with his populist rhetoric. So in a way, it's not too much of a not too much. It is a little bit of a red flag. I can understand why, but when you actually look into it, maybe not that much. So, what can we take away from this study? Well, I think it just proves a lot of people on the left have been saying all along, and that we need to focus on the actual issues that materially improve people's lives. This isn't saying to completely ditch the racial justice issues. It just means not to put them front and center like a lot of the progressives in Congress do. And that's not to say that they're wrong on the economic issues. That's to say that maybe they should prioritize them a little bit more. And don't abandon the fight for racial justice. Just don't make it a centerpiece of the campaign, if that makes sense. So what do you all think of the study? What do you think of it? I have a link to it down below. If you want to read the whole thing, I recommend it. It can really put a lot of things into context. And if you want to check out some more episodes of Kawa's Mind, you can click right over here. Otherwise, check out my latest video right over here. Hit subscribe, hit the like button if you like what you see here. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody. By the time you're seeing this, it is 2 days before Thanksgiving. So I'm going to be taking this Friday off for Thanksgiving weekend. So I'll see everybody next Tuesday. Peace out.